Good day and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Tracy Muller, and I'm Head of Advice and Philanthropy at Nedbank Wealth Management in South Africa. And I'm delighted to have the opportunity to host this session this morning. I'd like to thank you for connecting with us. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to connect with us. And I'm absolutely delighted to be in the presence of in my mind, three very inspirational ladies. And you know, when I started out in financial services, if anybody had have said to me all those years ago that you are going to get to be in the same presence as these three women, I would have said you're crazy. So it's just absolutely, so anybody that thinks financial services is boring, just to note to you, it's not boring. And I'm really looking forward to the hour that we're going to spend together in this conversation. So, the three inspiring women I have with me: to my left, Connie Ferguson, a renowned actor and businesswoman. Welcome, Connie. We've got Zanele Jafta, who is the head of digital advisory services for Nedbank Wealth Management. I fondly refer to her as the queen of DAS. But welcome, Zanele, and thank you for joining us. And our MC for today, Gugulethu Mfopi, who needs no introduction to the Nedbank world because you're very much part of the Nedbank family, Gugu. But Gugu is a conversation strategist, a global moderator, a broadcaster, a conference chair, and host of Kaya Biz on Kaya 95.9. So Gugu, thank you and welcome to you as well. So while we are connecting with you online in this way, it's also important to reflect on connections in general, but even more so when it comes to our financial matters. And the reason for that is because every single financial decision we make impacts our ability to protect what's important to us and to achieve our life goals and aspirations. And at Nedbank Private Wealth and Nedbank Financial Planning, we utilize our globally integrated, advice-led approach to connect your financial decisions to your life goals and aspirations. And you may be wondering, well, how does that practically work? Practically, we provide you with access to technical expertise, appropriate opportunities and solutions across Nedbank and other top providers, but most importantly, it's about connecting you to personal and objective advice that will enable you to make better financial decisions, avoid financial disasters, and realize your giving aspirations. And that's what we refer to as connected wealth. So just really to introduce the topic just very briefly today for our webinar today, and the topic is family businesses, setbacks, strategies, and business continuity. If we look at family businesses in the context of the economy and how do they contribute to the economy, they are one of the major contributors to our economy in South Africa. But what's really interesting is that very few of those businesses actually get to second or third generation. So hopefully that's what we're going to be unpacking here today. So just a couple of housekeeping things, not a lot, just a few little things. Please make use of the Q&A chat box on the left-hand side of your screen. Gugu's eagle eye on her iPad there is going to be watching those questions as they come through, so we really do invite you to make use of that Q&A chat box. We're going to be making a recording of the session available afterwards, and we'll send it out to you so you can share it with your friends, families, colleagues, and we really invite you to do that. If your screen should just happen to freeze, please don't panic. Just press the F5 button and it should take you back to where we ended off. So, without any further ado, I'm going to hand over to you, Gugu.
Thank you so much, Tracy. Such a delight to be present here and hosting this panel discussion with you, with the many queens that we have here on stage. So I promise that this will certainly prove to be quite a regal discussion. And as Tracy has so adequately set the tone and concept that we will be discussing here this morning, it's not only for us to understand the offerings that are available by Nedbank Private Wealth as well as Nedbank Financial Planning, but understanding how these help support the life goals and objectives that we've had, and understanding the importance, of course, of the fundamentals that play a role in ensuring that we are able to build businesses that craft great legacies and, most importantly, prove to be fruitful for generational wealth. And maybe let's start on that, going back to the basics, right? Just in terms of understanding, again, the importance and the fundamentals of financial planning and why it remains so critical, not only for all of us in our individual capacities, but of course, even more so as entrepreneurs. Zanele, this is your sweet spot and your focus in the business, because typically you lead a team that has the opportunity to engage with many of us on a one-to-one level. It's no secret that life is different for everyone, given their bespoke needs and their approaches to how it is that they choose to build wealth and leave a legacy for themselves. Take us back to some of those fundamentals in terms of the importance of adequate financial planning.
Thank you, Gugu. You decide to start with the nerd. So the nerd will start. Good morning to our audience. Gugu, I'm just going to start talking very high level, and I don't want to be technical at all. Right. So when you talk about the fundamentals of financial planning, we're really talking about a roadmap of your financial life. Right. And the roadmap really takes you through how do you achieve your goals and objectives. So what we generally do is we start by talking around where you are right now, which is your current financial affairs. So we take a snapshot of where we are, right? And then we also go ahead and we look at what are your goals and objectives so that we know exactly where to start with you. And then once we in that conversation, we then understand what your budgeting looks like. And people generally don't understand that we don't sell a product, we actually advise you on your financial life. So it's important for us to understand how do you spend your money, where do you spend your money, and how do we help you package that together before we actually start into the conversation of wealth protection, right? So wealth protection generally is risk management. And I always say to people, number one, you yourself is an asset, right? So we start there and say, how do you protect yourself as an asset? And then we go to the physical assets, being your house, being your car, being whatever it is. And then on top of that, we then go into an important one, which is wealth creation.
Yes.
How do we help you create your wealth? And for us, it's not just about creating the wealth. How do we grow it? How do we help you preserve it? And then importantly, and as Tracy has said, we then talk about legacy planning, right? You've done all of this. Now, how do we assist you with your legacy? And then as businesses and individuals, some of us actually do want to do something about it. And that's where Tracy will come in from a philanthropy point of view. So those are the basic fundamentals of what we look at when we talk about financial planning.
You've given us a snapshot of many people's financial lives, right? And as we know, there are many moving parts and intricacies that do come around the way. And Connie, we'll come to you in a moment to reflect on your experience as an entrepreneur, given the transition you've made throughout your career. But what you're highlighting here, especially when it comes to the wealth preservation, wealth creation, as well as legacy and philanthropy, remains very critical, especially for individuals who are in family-owned businesses.
Correct.
A great idea that is started by a pioneer in the family. You have intentions of growing and grooming this into a sustainable business. And this again highlights even further the importance of walking that journey with someone who is qualified to offer you that financial advice. Expand on this here, Zanele, because this seems as though it's the secret sauce to actually drive that success.
Yes. So Google, this is what people don't understand. I always say to entrepreneurs when you speak to them, as much as you put a business plan together before you start a business, right? You need to also have a financial plan that's going to help you sustain that business.
Beyond just bootstrapping and dipping into your pension fund, right?
That's it. That's it. Right. So financial planning actually takes you through that journey to say, you've got this sorted, but there are other aspects that we need to look at. Again, when we talk about family businesses and we talk about businesses in general, it also depends on the structure of the business. So if we were to talk, for example, about a sole prop, right? The conversation that a financial planner will have with you would be around succession planning. If anything happens to you, whether it is death, disability, or severe illness, what happens to your business? You're sole prop, right? And also we talk about instances where it's a different structure. You're not a sole prop. There's 2 or 3 other people in there, right? If now one business partner passes away, what happens to the business interest of that person, right? Is the family now must start running around figuring out, what do we do with so-and-so's things? So that's where we come in. For us, business continuity is very important. Succession planning, very important. And risk management for all entrepreneurs. And that's where we come in.
100%. What you've highlighted is really important, and I think does apply to the theme and the outputs that we're looking for here today to make this practical for all of us by reminding us some of the key considerations we need to bear in mind. Connie, this is why you are here.
Yeah.
We were joking a moment ago that the first time many of us as South Africans first laid eyes on her, she was Karabo Moroka on Generations and a well-known South African actress, as we know. But since then, you've taken on many characters, not only on screen through the likes of Harriet Khoza and Os Mavis, but more than that, transformed yourself into a phenomenal entrepreneur within the film and entertainment industry in South Africa, which certainly needs to be celebrated. But we all know the journey didn't start there. So maybe you can give us some insight into the journey into traversing from in front of the camera to behind the screen, and most importantly, leading an institution that is able to provide a livelihood and contribute to the economy for so many people.
Yeah. Thank you, Gugu. And thank you to our audience for joining us. This subject makes me very nervous.
Really?
It does. I think because we take it for granted. And especially depending on where we come from, our background, we are not educated on wealth. So even if I were to go into my journey as an entrepreneur, I could claim that I was an entrepreneur when I was 13 years old because I owned a salon at home. I made money. I was able to buy tomatoes and potatoes and, help the family out. But that's kind of how you trained, and you're not, like what Zanele is talking about now. It's like, I wish I had known all of these things when I started, right? Because now going back to how we started, Sho and I both started as performers before we were business people. And then you're literally working to feed your family, to feed your extended family, to feed yourself. So even though as actors we considered ourselves businesses, because you are the business,
Yeah.
there wasn't really mindfulness to wealth creation or to building an empire. So I think it was 16 years into Generations where I was turning 40. I think for me that was a turning point in my life. When I turned 40 and I thought, do I want to do this for the rest of my life? Like, am I just going to be an actor for the rest of my life that earns a salary? Yes, I was very good at saving and all that, but...
Which is different for people in the entertainment
Which
industry,
is different
right?
for people in the entertainment industry, but how am I growing? How am I building from just one salary? Okay, multiple salaries if I did other gigs. So Sho and I put our heads together and thought, you know what? I think we've been in the industry long enough to start our own production company, because also we were creatives who just wanted to give back to the industry. But how we approached it as well was just not from the point of view of a producer, but from the point of view of a business person.
Yes.
Again, and this is what people don't realize about our industry, is that if you don't treat your production house as a business, you're only ever going to be a producer. And what that means is that you will get commissioned a production. All that money that comes into the production is not your money. So you're basically acting as an agent, because that the money goes out to suppliers. That money pays your actors, it pays your employees. And at the end of that, then you get what is called a production markup. Then that is what comes to you. But can that sustain a business? No. So long story short, we found ways to modify our business model. And we thought, wait, we have 10 million rands coming in. Of that 10 million, 9 million is gone. We left with 1 million. What do we do with 1 million? So how do we have a portion of that 9 million to make sure that not all that money leaves the company? So we started looking at the value chain and to say, okay, we have expertise here. Why can't we be part of this value chain and part of this value chain and part of the... So we started creating other businesses inside of Ferguson Films to extend the business. And that's how we were able to build.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm glad that you're highlighting this, because it does bring it closer to home for so many of us as South Africans. And you refer to Shauna Ferguson, your late husband, who is a co-founder of the business as well, and unfortunately passed away just over 2 years ago due to COVID. But we will come to that, because it does play a significant role in terms of understanding that financial journey you work together.
Yeah.
Coming back to, I guess, restructuring and reconfiguring your business, obviously this does mean that you need to think about it differently in terms of the finances and business operations that you're running. Talk to us as to how you managed to navigate that journey with the support of a financial advisor, and understanding the bigger picture it plays, not only in the business, but even in your personal lives, given wealth creation and preservation there.
Yeah. I think Sho and I were lucky because we spoke a lot and we read a lot. And this is why I say I wish we knew this earlier, because I think just generally, and this is a misconception that we have as young Black people, is that when a financial advisor comes to you, is they want to make money off of you.
Ah, you see products first.
You see
Yes,
products
Yeah.
first, right?
yes.
And it's a fear that I think we need to get over, because
Mm.
I can just imagine how much further we would be if we had sat down with someone that had helped us structure properly, plan properly, spend properly.
Yes.
That we would be much further. So yeah, that's very important. We have one now. But yes, like you say, the role of a financial advisor in an entrepreneur's life can never be underestimated.
100%, really important. I do want you to keep your questions coming through on the chat platform because we will get to them. And perhaps this is also where the conversation does segue as well, Connie, to taking a look at the unfortunate loss of your husband's life, right?
Yeah.
Because whilst you might be an entrepreneur and show up within your leadership roles in your business, you still have family.
Yeah.
And like many of the people who are joining us here today, there are people that we care for, loved ones that we want to provide for, and even loved ones perhaps that we might venture into business with. And that brings out the complexities of a family business. Let's talk about that particular structure, and then moving to the transition of the loss of your husband and how that impacted the business. And perhaps from there we can, further understand how it is that adequate financial planning can support many of these risk factors.
Yeah. Losing Show was difficult because he was a director in Ferguson Films as well. But not only that, he was more the admin person also.
Ah, okay.
So he was a big part of the engine that ran the business. So I remember Sho and I used to have a lot of moments where we would sit there. So we have two daughters, Desadi and Alicia, where we would sit the girls down and go, you guys need to understand this business. We are not here forever. We're not building for us, we're building for you.
And let's be honest,
But
when
it's-
you're raising teenagers, it's not always fully understood,
It's
right?
not understood. But it's difficult though as a parent, and I'm sure a lot of parents will appreciate this, because we build thinking we're building for our family, right? You want your children to be able to take over from you and continue the legacy and have like a proper succession plan. It's difficult when your children are not really inclined to what you do, or when their interests are in something else completely different. And I think the sensitive part is almost forcing them into the business and forcing them to be what you are, because that's what they'll end up saying, that I'm not you, mom, or I'm not you, dad. I don't want to be an executive producer. I don't want to be a producer. I want to act. The other one is into music. I want to play music. So it becomes very difficult, because then who do you go to? How do you adapt your succession plan to make sure that your business continues even when you're not here?
Yep.
And that your children will still be taken care of even though they're not actively involved in the business. So I think what I'm doing now, Sans Show, because it's been very challenging without him. I'm not even going to front, right? Because I think I relied so heavily on him for a lot of the admin stuff. So we roped my sister into the business. She's blood, she's family. She is an administrative genius. So at least I know I have the right person now in that position.
And there's a big lesson that I think we should all learn there, is that in as much as you're including family and having them actively participate in the
Yes.
succession, they've got the adequate skills to cover that gap as well.
They
Which
have to.
oftentimes for family-owned businesses can be a challenge, right?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And unfortunately with families sometimes is there will be expectations that, you know what, you're an employer. Why don't you employ your little brother? Why don't you employ your niece or your nephew? Empower your family. And there's nothing that would give me more joy than to do that. But what skills do they bring to the company?
Yes.
Because we are building, we are not destroying. We're not trying to bring something in that's going to take us 10 steps back. If you're saying to me, you know what, this child is talented in such and such a way, can we take her to school and get her educated and get her prepared for such and such a role? In that way, then we happy to help build, right? But for immediate positions, it's not something that you can just say just because your family come into the business.
100%. You've touched on so many points that I think are really critical for us to build up on. And Tracy, I'm hoping that you can also come in here. Not only is it that dynamic of managing your wealth as well as your finances as an individual adequately, but also as a business to make sure that it runs effectively. But as you say, walking that journey to cover the administrative concerns that might exist within the business. And most importantly, as you've also highlighted, understanding the dynamics of building a legacy, but future consequences of how we're going to manage and leave this legacy. And maybe, Tracy, this is where you can come in just to flesh out and elaborate as well on the tools, or on how it is that financial services does offer you ways of managing not only wealth creation in terms of building that legacy, but also understanding the consequences of legacy and preservation there.
Yeah, absolutely, Gugu. So, I mean, we spoke about financial planning earlier and the importance of financial planning because that's almost your roadmap on your journey. And along that journey, you're going to get potholes, you're going to get all sorts of things that are going to come at you. But a very important part of financial planning, in fact, a cornerstone of financial planning, is estate planning and succession planning.
Yeah.
And what that really looks at is that looks at if I do pass away today, what are things so and a lot of people don't like talking about death. I mean, that's the reality as well. In particular, when you're dealing with family, it's a difficult discussion to have with them. But the reality is, it is something that's inevitable. And because it's inevitable, the sooner we start having those discussions with our family, those that we love, that are dear to us, the better it will be. But estate planning is really looking at, if I pass away today, what does that mean from a succession planning perspective? So in the context of a family business, it's important to understand, how have I structured the legal ownership? How am I operating my family business?
Yes.
Zanele, you mentioned about a sole prop. And how the personal financial affairs of a sole prop and business affairs, they become intertwined. So it's really looking at the legal ownership option through which the business is operating. It's then, for me, it's also around trying to get a full view of what are the costs of dying. Because the reality is, when we pass away, there are costs, and we need to make provision for those.
Yes.
And if we're running a business, even more so where we have key influences in the business, it's important to make provision for that individual passing away, because we want the operations to continue. So these are the kind of things that we need to look at when we're looking at estate planning and we're looking at succession planning. It's trying to make sure that we're preparing for the inevitable. We're not putting it off. We're not saying it's never going to happen. We're trying to be prepared. We're trying to go into that situations with our eyes wide open, understanding what are the costs going to be, making provision. It's around trying to protect those business assets, Connie. I mean,
Yeah.
you've worked hard to create this empire. It's around trying to protect those assets, but importantly, protect our loved ones.
100%. And what I'm hearing from this is, of course, you're trying to adequately plan for the future, but life is happening now. And there's suppliers to be paid, there's contracts to sign off with, employees who also need to be taken care of. And sometimes we get so caught up in the rigmarole that you forget key man insurance.
Yes.
Have I updated my life cover? What does this mean for the business insurance? And perhaps this is where we can also elaborate. And Connie, feel free to also share your experience here. When and how, as entrepreneurs, we need to find the time to take that pause to say, hold on, we're doing something different in the business, or something's changed within our family dynamic. So we actually need to go back to the drawing board to make sure that we are on track for that final legacy plan. Zanele, maybe you can elaborate, because it gets busy.
Yeah, it does. It does, definitely, Gugu. So if you don't mind, Connie, I'll just take your example with your sister,
Please, not
right?
a problem.
Because now you've taken the sister into the business, right? And you sort of run the business with her. And as Tracy has said, your sister, okay, not, yeah. So if I look at this, your sister plays a key critical role, right? And in our language, would say she's a key person, right? And this is what Gugu's talking about, to say, then what happens if that key person is gone, right? Now I'm going to need to bring somebody else. I need finances to retrain somebody. I need finances to go look for somebody new who's going to come and fill in that space, right? So we also look at it from a key person perspective. Okay, and then another aspect that we look at is, I mean, you would know, businesses require credit, right? And they do take credit. And when the person, an eventuality happens to one of the people in the businesses, who's going to carry that credit, right? So we come in there with a credit cover, because somebody has to cover that. And as Tracy has said, whatever happens in your business actually affects your estate on a personal capacity. So if we don't look at things that we can do to cover all those loans, right? And in certain instances, we also put surety when we take loans.
Yes.
Right? And those things have a huge impact on your personal estate plan. So it's really, really lovely, and I'd like for entrepreneurs to take this seriously. As much as you're running your business, take a step back, speak to your financial advisor, right? Your financial planner, years ago, they used to sell products, right? And it's a fact, they used to sell product, right? What we do now is literally just advise you, and we take you on a journey with us, right? And that's very important. So I'd really encourage the entrepreneurs, take a step back, run the business, let's walk with you on the journey to make sure there's succession plan, there's risk management, because that's what it is in your business.
100%.
I will definitely take that on board because now, just from personal experience, I know how ill prepared we were.
Got
Yeah.
you. And maybe elaborate on that, perhaps what you would do differently in hindsight, in terms of just making sure that the journey would have been easier to walk on.
For example, what Zanele was talking about, key person, do you call it key person insurance?
Yes.
We didn't have key person insurance. It took me a while to even understand what key person insurance was. So there's a lot about people insurance. We know about life insurance. We know about RAs. We know about all those things, right?
Got you.
But when you start off in business as an entrepreneur, there's so much, especially if you didn't go to school for business necessarily, right? You figure it out as you go along. Life happens, you become hectic, and you just focus on the work that needs to be done. You forget that you're not here forever, and you kind of have to prepare for the unforeseen.
Yes.
So when the unforeseen happens, then you go, you just hit with this in your face, and you go, where do I even start? So now you start getting this information. Now you start learning that this is what should have been in place that wasn't in place. It's a difficult way to learn, but we learn. And hopefully as we learn, then we teach others as well that, look, this is the mistake that I made. These things were not in place when this happened.
Yeah.
This is how you can protect yourself and your family.
Got you.
And I guess, just going back to the role of a financial advisor, because, I think when we're running a business, you get so involved with the day-to-day. But if you really think of the role of a financial advisor, they are key critical. So I think what often happens is we get so involved in the moment, trying to run the business, that we forget about who are those key role players. Because it's all about a relationship,
It
and you
is.
need to have a relationship with your financial advisor. So, the minute things change, it needs to be a phone call to the financial advisor. This has happened. Am I still on track? Am I still going to be able to achieve my goals? Have I got enough cover in the event that I die? So, I think the role of a financial advisor, I think when you're starting out, you're an entrepreneur, you've got this great idea. It's the last thing you think about, but yet it's one of the most important roles to bring in as soon as possible,
Definitely.
build that relationship, and walk that journey together.
Definitely. And in a moment, I do want us to talk about some of those solutions that do need to become practical and common language, whether it's key man insurance or understanding the kind of credit that you can access, or additional cover or insurance for that particular credit in order to cover any shortfalls that might exist. Because once we get comfortable with the lingo as entrepreneurs, regardless of what sector we're in, then it's easy to come back to your advisor and say,
Correct.
I believe this might be what I need, or to even understand it when your financial advisor shares that. But of course, we'll come to that in just a moment, because there's so much more to expand upon. This is a conversation that you can actively participate in, as well as our guests joining us online today. So do be sure to share your questions in the chat service that's available online. A few of you have already done so, and I'm going to make sure that we ask a few of them here. We have a question from Sylvia Toka, who actually asks, why would you say financial education is the engine of wealth creation? And in as much as we might have covered some aspects of it, I'm happy for us just to reinforce that as we respond to Sylvia's question. Zanele?
So I'll take that. Thanks, Google. so if you look at, I'll speak for me, for example, right, from where I come from, right. We were not exposed to financial education and financial planning, right? And we were never exposed to conversations about finances. That was left to our parents to sort out and deal with it, right? And that is why you find a whole lot of people find themselves in situations that they're in right now. So financial education is key critical in you understanding where you're going.
Yep.
Right. If you can just have goals, but if you don't know what you don't know, right, you're going to, get yourself out of the way completely.
100%.
Right? So financial education is very critical because, one, when you come speak to your financial planner, they need to understand your goals first. It is not about them, right? It is about what's important to you. And if there's a lack of financial education, you won't even know where to start.
100%.
Right. So what we do, and sometimes we call ourselves financial coaches because it also starts there, right? When we have conversations with a client, it's literally about financial coaching before we come to solution. So it is absolutely critical,
Definitely.
right, in the path.
I'm glad you mentioned that. In my mind, I'm envisioning the 6 steps that many of you that you take us through when it comes to financial planning, as you uncovered around covering the risk and having the necessary insurance, preserving the current level of wealth you have, assets and tools that actually help you produce that level of income, and then from there moving to wealth creation. But to keep with that question very briefly, Tracy, I'm hoping that this is where you can also come in just to expand on the importance of financial education. The question is, why do we say financial education is the engine of wealth creation? But I think it's also important that we understand that wealth creation has various steps, right? And doesn't just end when we are alive and active and able to earn an income, but the legacy, the preservation, and even the philanthropy also plays an important aspect there.
Absolutely. So I mean, yeah, you're touching on something that I'm very passionate about when you mention the word philanthropy, and so it is about, for me, it's around understanding the client and I mean, Zanele's spoken about understanding the goals, and I think it's important to understand, where do you want to get to? What are the things that you want to achieve? Because if you understand where you want to get to, you can then put the necessary plans in place to get there. In particular, when it comes to philanthropy, I mean, it's quite interesting because, we all know that we give in different ways. And what we do see, though, in particular when we're coming to family businesses and to smaller businesses, is how the smaller businesses actually give in multiple ways as well. So, I mean, if you think about it, employing employees. So you're creating work. I mean, that's one way of giving. What we've seen, and we've seen some really great stories around how we have businesses that are then starting to take it a little bit broader from just, the employees and benefiting family if it's a family business and that, but they're actually taking it into the community, and they're looking in the community and saying, well, how can I actually make a difference in my community as well? So I think for me, it's around that discussion is just so important, and to understand, what is one's aspirations? What is one's goals? What is it that one really wants to achieve? And it's just interesting because, when from a philanthropy perspective, we launch the Giving Report every 2 years,
Yes.
and we look at the high net worth, the behaviors, the giving behaviors of high net worth individuals. And it's interesting when you see what are the key behaviors of individuals. And, the one thing is that people want to give to causes that they're passionate about. And you have to sometimes you have to experience someone else's pain to want to be able to make a difference, if that makes sense.
Makes sense.
And I think where, in particular, if we bring it back to the business and the family business context, where as a family business owner, you have that power, is really to change the communities in which you're operating as well. And I just think that's really powerful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And I think a critical aspect that we should expand on in just a moment to provide a better understanding for many entrepreneurs. As you say, it expands beyond just where your business mandate might end, but really understanding the purpose and the end goal and vision that you might have for the legacy you'd like to leave behind. Help us understand what kind of tools or assistance it is that through Nedbank Private Wealth as well as Nedbank Financial Planning, that there are ways in order to navigate this. Because some might assume, well, I just might give 10% and contribute it to a local community center, but they're really tangible ways of making it practical and sustainable as well in the long term.
Absolutely. And I think that's where it also depends on what type of client you're dealing with. Because if you're looking at, for example, a non-profit organization, to make a non-profit organization sustainable, it's around, as financial experts who do good, giving financial expertise, looking at that non-profit organization and assisting them and guiding them in terms of managing something like reserves, which, if you look at the impact COVID had, in
Yes.
particular on non-profit organizations, it's those, or in fact, we ran what we call the Resilience Awards, which was just to recognize those non-profit organizations who, through challenging times, were able to still make a difference because we were helping them to manage their reserves. So in terms of the tools, that's one of the tools. If you're a non-profit organization, it's how do we enable you, and how do we help you manage and build those reserves so that it can be making a difference in a sustainable way, as you say, and in a more impactful way for longer.
100%. I'm hearing an interplay here of what do your
Yeah.
books look like? What is your purpose? How is it that we can help you? So
Great.
all of these themes do certainly speak to each other. And maybe just on the back of the comment around COVID, before we come back to one of the questions we have on the chat platform, are there some key lessons that we've witnessed from entrepreneurs and business owners from the pandemic that have actually heightened this focus that we have on family-owned businesses and some of the structures they have to have in place?
So, Gugu, I mean, I've mentioned the managing of reserves for, in particular, non-profit organizations, but that also applies to businesses and
Yes.
family-owned businesses, because the minute your income dries up, what do you do? And if you can't generate, I'm just thinking of, restaurants as an example that had to close their doors. There was no income coming in. So for a lot of businesses where they're providing a service which required, being open to the public in a way, you need to look at it from a reserve planning perspective as well.
Cash is king, all about cash flow, right? And that needs to be part of
Yeah.
your lingo, despite the fact that you're from the arts.
No,
Yeah.
100%. I mean, COVID affected us as well, but for us, it was more than just COVID. I mean, as a production company, you need to have a production to run.
Yeah.
So when you don't have a production, it essentially you don't have an active company,
Ooh,
basically. So if you don't have reserves, you then don't have a company.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what you're talking about. That if you haven't saved up for rainy days, what happens to you when you're waiting for, when we, like right now, we're just working on so many other concepts that are in development. Development is not production. So you have a limited team that is developing, but you don't have the whole crew, you don't have actors, you don't have everybody else that you get to employ when you are in production.
sure.
So it's an ever-changing dynamic with production companies.
You work in a very interesting space, and I think the rest of us can think, oh, mining is cyclical, but as you're
No.
describing now, when it comes to production and media,
Yeah.
it's just as cyclical.
It is. It's very cyclical. If you're not doing long form, for example, if you're going to do a drama, you're literally working for 12 weeks, and then it's dry. So if you don't have something to roll over onto, then you have dry seasons, and then you're working. Then you have dry seasons, and then you're working. So if you're not smart with your finances, you'll literally always be broke.
My goodness. Zanele, this must get you
It's hand
excited
to
because
mouth.
it's like cash flow spikes up and down.
Yes.
Which obviously means that the kind of financial tools you use or solutions you implement really need to speak to that need. So as you've highlighted, cash reserves remain quite critical.
Yes.
Zanele,
Correct, correct. And I was just going to come in from a different angle, right? Because we've been speaking about financial planning, which is critical, right? But there's the element of what Nedbank does, which is banking,
Yes.
right? And there's that very important relationship that the business needs to have with their banker, right? So you might have reserves, but if we had a period that was as long as COVID, you're going to run out of those reserves, right? Then what happens? What is your relationship with your banker? What's your relationship with the bank, right? How do I then use the facilities that are available from a credit point of view?
Yes.
So there's different aspects on what financial services do, right? And the experts within the financial services environment play a role in family businesses and entrepreneurship.
Definitely. Sure, it's a lot to absorb and a lot to take in. So we understand
Yeah.
the many frustrations that many of you do have as entrepreneurs, not only ensuring that you build up and incorporate a form of revenue generation through the businesses that you establish, understanding how you incorporate your family within those dynamics. And of course, as has been highlighted, the adequate risk cover, succession planning that needs to be taken into account, and more so how to keep that business sustainable for the long term by using current tools and methods that might be available. We have have 2 questions that have come in so far as well on the chat service, but do feel free to keep them coming as we still have more time to take many of your questions. Connie, the next 2 are for you. So we have Njabulo asking to Connie, would you say that you are now comfortable with your succession plan should something happen to you via death or any incapacitation? Have you fully addressed that aspect, and were you ready before your late husband's passing?
Okay, that question is threefold.
Yes.
And the answer to all 3 questions is no.
Got you.
I wasn't ready. And no, I'm not ready now, but I'm working on it. At least I've identified where we lacked, and it's something that I'm actively working on now. What was the third
If you're
one?
comfortable to indulge us there, perhaps it might assist us with other entrepreneurs in understanding the kind of level of introspection or observation that you need to put forward to say, this is where the gap is, this is the
Yes.
support that's required.
So Shaw and I worked very closely together, right? We were both creatives and we ran the business together.
Yes.
But he was from a corporate background. So in terms of business, he was more like the business head,
Got you.
right? So in as much as I learned a lot from him, I do need assistance with admin especially. And this is where now my sister came in. In terms of the financial part of the business, we were always managing very pedantically so our own finances. We weren't actively speaking to a financial advisor. I mean, a lot of these things we could have done differently, and we didn't necessarily. So I think I'm now very intentional about legacy planning, about succession. I mean, this word succession plan gave me so much stress.
Really?
I promise you, the first time someone asked me, what is your succession plan? It actually really made my eyes pop because I realized I don't actually have a succession plan. I'm thinking more, well, you know, when I say it in Setswana, buswa.
Yes.
I'm thinking more, what am I going to leave for my
For
children
children,
when I die? You know, the
yes.
typical parent thing, and not so much the business person thing. So now I have to look at it more from a business point of view, from an entrepreneur's point of view, to say, yes, maybe if something happens to me tomorrow, my children will be fine, but for how long? But what happens to my business when I'm not here?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Very valid point, and I'm hoping we can come back to that particular question. The next question we have from Kekezo, who asks, what is it that you, Connie, wish could be improved on how financial planning professionals and institutions do things? Second part to the question is, what approach would be more welcomed by people in your industry? So some lessons that we'll learn here, I guess.
Okay, let's start with the first one. I just asked the first question again.
What is it that you wish would be improved on how financial planning professionals or institutions do things?
Number one, they sound very educated, which they are. I just think financial lingo sounds complicated. I think it can be overwhelming and intimidating. I think sometimes when you're talking to people that are, especially not from a financial background, you kind of need to understand that you're talking to a layman here. You know, so sometimes, treat us like we are in primary school. You know, take us through the right steps without overwhelming us so we get it. So by the time we get to intermediate phase, we go, oh no, I understand that. Now I can do this better. Now I can do it. So that we also kind of grow with you because you guys understand the lingo. Like you know what you're talking about. But for us, it can be overwhelming because like you say, before you approach me, to me, it's like you're selling a product and you want to make money off of me, and already I'm scrambling. I don't have money to be paying extra towards things I don't understand. But if you make it clear to me that no, I'm actually not trying to make money off of you, I'm actually trying to help you preserve your money or to help you make more money. And I think just us also as, I'll call us consumers for lack of a better word, we can be a bit more open.
Yes.
You know, and disregard everything we've been taught about financial planners and just be open-minded and hear them out and see how they can actually help you. Because I do believe, you know, just as different business owners, and we understand that different businesses have different needs, but from a financial point of view, we all need the same education.
100%. And I think you've hit the nail on the head there, answering those questions twofold in terms of the approach and perhaps the language. And this is why these kind of conversations do take place, so that there's a clear understanding of how to
Yes.
meet each other halfway. But what was being highlighted in this conversation that I think is important for us to focus on, especially towards building sustainable businesses. Succession planning has come up quite often, together with, of course, the point of leaving a legacy. And this perhaps takes us back, Connie, to the theme that you were sharing in terms of incorporating your daughters into the business. Your sister has now come on board and is your right hand in terms of the operations and administrations of the business. But as you say, it's beyond just leaving them an inheritance. It's really about making sure that the business itself can survive. And this takes us to a broader concept because many more themes need to be considered. If the children aren't involved in the business, how do I get them involved? If they aren't, do I get an external party? How do they operate in such a manner that will still serve and benefit the interests of your children as well as key stakeholders within the business? And what does that look like from a financial point of view in terms of the necessary cover and of course, tools and accessibility to products that can assist us on this journey. I'm keen for us to perhaps start there. Maybe Connie, starting off with yourself, perhaps as you look at succession, what does Ferguson Films look like in 20 years' time, whether you're there or not? And maybe let's unpack the kind of conversations that should be had with our financial planners here.
Yeah, I think as a company, we've started looking at more partnerships now. With like-minded people, with people that have the same goals as us, because again, in Setswana re re mabogo di nko a thebana, and you know, sometimes when you're trying to do something on your own, you can never go as far as when you know, you collaborate with other people.
Yeah.
So we're looking at a lot more collaborations and keeping the children involved and in as far as they can be involved, just so they know what the business is and what it's about.
100%.
Not so much so that they will run it, no, but just so, God forbid, something happens to me, they know what to look out for and they know the right questions to ask and who to ask and where to go.
That's important. And that obviously speaks to the kind of conversations now that might shift with financial planners, right? To actually say, okay, if we're looking at 20 years, if we're looking at collaborations, that brings up a whole new conversation in terms of the ownership structure, which was mentioned earlier. What that means in terms of the shareholding, what that means in terms of various risk covers that also need to be put in place. Again, Zanele, a lot to take in, but guide us through some of these concepts that entrepreneurs need to consider specifically to succession planning.
Okay, I'm going to try and make it as basic as I can without using the big terminologies. Okay, so I'll start with your key person insurance, right? And that, again, if you don't mind, I'll use your example because I think it's practical and also for the audience to have a more, you know, tangible example,
Understanding.
right? So in your business, we've already said you've got your sister and yourself, right? And your sister possesses critical skills, and you also possess critical skills, right? So in the eventuality, I prefer to call it eventuality because people always think death. There's also disability. There's also a severe illness, right? Because remember, you might get sick and you incapacitated to the extent that you can't run your business, right? And that's where that comes in. So if you then get your key person insurance, that's what it does. It says, this is a critical person in my space, right? And if anything happens to this person, how do I then make sure that my business is not disturbed? Okay. How do I immediately get a person with similar skills? Because then you get a payout, right, from covering the person within the business. And that's one of that, okay? And I spoke again around what we know, entrepreneurs do get credit or loans from the bank.
Yes.
Right. And not necessarily because you don't have the cash flow to run your business, but there's instances where you really need to do that. Right. So if you now, as an entrepreneur, goes and take a loan at the bank and something happens to you, who's liable to pay that loan? Right. So that's where now the loan cover comes in, because we then literally cover the loan, you know, should anything happen. And then we've got what you call, I'll use the term contingent liability, right? So if you are directors of the business and you need to get loans, like huge amounts of credit, banks generally require surety because it's a huge amount and it's a risk for the bank.
Yep.
Then what happens when the eventuality happens? Your surety, which might be your house, is at the bank, right? And part of your legacy planning was to leave your house to your kids.
Yeah.
But now you've put it at the bank as a surety. So what do I do now? What happens now? And that is where the contingent liability comes in. So when you then speak to your financial planner, that's why I said it's important, the conversations, it's really around the goals and your objectives.
Yep.
Start there and say, my concerns are around if anything happens to me or my sister, then what? You know. And then the function of a financial planner is to say, okay, let's look at what can we do and how do we then assist you. It shouldn't be the other way around, you know.
100%.
So those are the tools for any business that they need to have.
100%. From this, I'm also hearing the importance of a will. An
Yes.
important document that many South Africans tend to shrug their shoulders and think, well, it's too soon, not quite yet. Maybe I need to accumulate more assets. But what we're learning from this is this: for as long as you are in your individual capacity, someone who has some kind of assets, and even more so if you happen to be an entrepreneur with a business that you hope will run sustainably in future, this actually speaks to adequate estate planning. Tracy, this remains
Yeah.
critical, right?
Absolutely, Connie. Sorry, absolutely, Gugu, sorry. But I was also just thinking as you were talking about the will, because I often say this, you know, if you look at a will, the will actually becomes our voice when we no longer have one.
Yes.
And that's why it's so important, because without a will, without getting complex again, you know, other laws apply and the assets don't devolve as we would like them to devolve. Because, you know, if anything happens to us, we want our loved, your daughters in your context, to be looked after.
Yes.
So that's why it's so critical, the will. So yes, really just echoing your comments around the fact that a will is important, and why it's important, because it becomes our voice when we no longer have one. I think also I just wanted to add on to what Zanele was saying, just
Sure.
in terms of the risk cover, because I think one of the challenges, and what I'm hearing from you, Connie, the challenges is the daughters don't want to now get into the business. Now you've got your sister that's come in, but what next? And the word you said scared you, succession planning perspective, but what does it mean now? So what we do see is that in that context, sometimes we do see that there are other individuals within the business that are really standing up, and that they're really showing that they can take on that additional responsibility, etc. But again, it's also around understanding the legal ownership structure through which the business operates. I mean, you know, Zanele's spoken about some of the risk covers that one can have, but another very important one in particular, if you are an individual as a shareholder in the business, and again, there's someone else that could take over the running of that business, is to make sure that you have buy and sell agreements in place, so that that individual can actually fund the buying of those shares. So in your context, again, the profits of the business will go to the daughters, so you're leaving them with a legacy, but the actual running of the business continues, because you've got someone now that stepped in, has taken over the shareholding. So
And what you're highlighting there, Tracy, if I may come in,
yes,
is
please.
such an important aspect, because what we are finding is this, I guess, coordination of your private or personal and family life intersecting very closely with your business life, right? And that almost seems as though, how do you approach that adequately from an estate planning point of view? One will, or do you need separate documentation? Do you have a different conversation with your family as to what you would with your fellow directors and business owners? Because sometimes those nuances perhaps add a different dynamic to those conversations.
Yeah. And you only have one will. I mean, that's the bottom line in this context, unless we start investing internationally. But in this
Yes.
context, it would be one will. And for me, the will is almost, it comes at the end, because you need to make sure you've got a will in place from day one, because
Yes.
we don't want to tempt fate. But the reality is that the will comes in at the end, because you want to make sure you've got all of the planning in place, and the will takes care of the loose ends. Because, you know, if, as an example, you know, you have family trusts, just as an example, then those aren't dealt with in terms of the will. So it's around making sure you've got the right structures in place. I think, you know, during your lifetime, that you understand what the consequences are of those structures. And then, as I say, bringing the will in at the end, which is really just to try and tie in those loose ends.
Definitely. I'm glad that you mentioned that. We've got some time to take a few more questions. So
Okay.
to any of you joining us online, do feel free to send through your questions, as we have about 7 more minutes to go for this webinar, but more than happy to hear some of your thoughts and feedback into the various themes that we're discussing. I think one thing is certainly clear, that regardless of who you are as an individual, some level of guidance in terms of your financial planning and wealth support can be provided. And that journey is even more highlighted, especially when you become an entrepreneur, which itself can have its own demands, needs, and requirements in order to ensure the sustainable growth of your business. But I'm keen to also understand, especially when it comes to the conversations keeping with succession planning, as well as the incorporation of friends or loved ones, or family members within the business. Again, the sharing of this kind of knowledge and information with them, because so often at times the original founders tend to hold
Yeah.
onto the secret sauce or the knowledge or the admin,
Yeah.
because they keep the ship going.
Yeah.
But the open disclosure of this knowledge and information often becomes important. And whether it's part of the estate planning and what the will says, you know, you don't promise one door to the company, meanwhile the other had an eye on it. But most importantly, just the adequate running of the business and knowledge of what to look out for, as you mentioned, Connie. Maybe Zanele, you can start off by sharing some thoughts here.
Yeah, Kuku, this for me again becomes a very difficult conversation, right? In a sense of how open can you be, should you be, right? Number one, with family, right? Do I call my family and tell them what I intend to do with my business, for example? And this is a conversation that we have with clients, and clients will tell you that, Zanele, you understand, it's very difficult in my world, right? I've got 2 children or 3 children, whatever it is. Now, do I tell them now what my intentions are? It might cause discord in my family, But from a financial planning point of view, I think it's absolutely critical that you lay your cards on the table, you have a frank conversation about what will happen to the business, what will happen to my own personal assets, what will happen to where, right? And I think as financial planners as well, we must not dismiss the fear that clients have, right? Where some would say, geez, if I tell my son, he's probably going to kill me, right? Because they would want me to die quicker. And that's a fact. It's a conversation that we have. But, and this is where now the financial education comes in, because they need to understand the reason why I'm telling you what I'm telling you. I'm sharing with you so that you know, if I'm expecting you to be part of the business, you need to start getting into the business now, right? And start getting the skills required to run the business. If you have no intentions of ever getting into the business, how do I have my own exit strategy, right, as a business owner? Because you have to have your exit strategy. So if we again have to use Connie, if your sister did not want to be part of the business, right, you would then need to have your exit strategy to say, if none of my family members want to be part of this, what then? Should they sell the business and get the proceeds and then they divide or whatever? But it's a conversation that needs to be had with the family.
100%.
So for me, absolutely critical. Have an exit strategy, regardless of your legal structure, whether you're a sole prop or whether you are, shareholding environment, because what happens to my business interests, right? So right now you might be in a 25% shareholder, right? And your kid in 10 years' time might want to be part of it and take over. Or your partners might say, actually, we don't want anybody else. We'll buy over their shares, their interests. So those are very, very critical conversations.
Very important, and helps avoid any kind of conflict that
It
might
does.
occur, which, as we know,
Yeah.
sometimes
It
can be the
does.
norm.
And that's why I think communication is just key,
Yeah.
because, I mean, if you also look at why do a lot of businesses not succeed to the next generation, I think it's 85%, one of the top reasons is lack of trust as well
Whoa.
in
Yes.
families, because there isn't that open communication. So that leads to lack of trust. And so I think communication is just key. And I mean, Zanele, you're touching on some good points around the feedback that we've had from some of our
Yes.
clients. Well, if I tell my son now, he's going to become a beach bum because he's going to, well, just sit back and do nothing or whatever the case may be. but but I mean, there's a bit of discernment that needs to be applied to it as well, because you need to also understand how financially astute are. To your point, Connie, not everybody's financial experts. And I'm so glad you mentioned that this morning, because I often forget that. So it serves as a good reminder, because you get so into the moment. But so for me, I just think communication is key, and having those discussions. I mean, we mentioned earlier around, death, and how that's not an easy discussion to have with loved ones. But if we think about, if we do have those discussions and people know who to go to, because I mean, in the context you mentioned, Connie, you want your daughters to know if anything happens to you, who do they go to? Which again speaks to making sure you've got a trusted advisor, and that your children have met that trusted advisor. I mean, that's also, from a continuity perspective, just things to start thinking about, and getting the family more involved so that they are aware. I mean, simple things, you go to the effort of putting a will in place, but do your family know where it is or who they need to contact? And the emotional trauma one goes through when someone loses someone, I mean, that, as you know, Connie, that kind of overshadows everything else. And now you've got to start worrying about all these other things. So communication in families, to me, is just paramount.
100%, very important. We've got a comment here from Suzanne as well, who actually agrees with the sentiments that have been shared so far. She says this conversation is key. We had this in our family, and then the children know exactly what they need to do and what is going on. In the case of death, everybody knows exactly what they need to follow up on. And I think this speaks to something so critical. And perhaps to come back to you, Connie, and to personalize it, you typically reference on social media or publicly, with the continuation of your production company, the show goes on.
Yes.
And that's a wonderful reference to not only your husband, but of course, typically that the show has to go on. And I guess in your closing words, for many entrepreneurs who might be listening, regardless of the sector and sphere that they come from, what are your closing remarks for their show to go on and continue, in terms of the financial lessons that we need to implement?
Okay. For the show to go on, we need to be smarter. I think as entrepreneurs, we always believe we're smart because we're creative, we come up with ideas, we get things done. But succession plans, I have learned, are very important. Painful way to learn for me, but it's something that I'm doing something about now. So I think let's stop being scared of financial advisors. I think they are there to assist us and not to bully us into buying any products. I really don't believe that's what it's about. Honestly, from the bottom of my heart, I feel like we have a role to play as entrepreneurs and as parents, to protect the legacy that we're working so hard on, to have succession plans in place and to make sure that whatever we work for today can continue for generations to come.
100%. I must tell you, there's a lot of positive feedback around this conversation at Tsidido, saying this is such an eye-opening conversation for our entrepreneurs. Thanks, Trace and Zanele, for bringing this conversation to the fore. I hope our frontline are learning on how to make the conversation more palatable and address the fears that our clients have without intimidating them. Geketso, your question has also been noted, essentially saying that, hold on, advisors should actually ensure that they do relate with their clients in a more adequate manner. I thoroughly appreciate this conversation that we've had here today. There's so many levers to it, and I understand that, of course, everyone's situation and circumstance is very unique based on their entrepreneurial background, the stage and level of the growth of their business, and of course, what the long-term goal and vision might be. But one thing is quite certain that I think we've all uncovered here on this conversation, that fundamentally, your life is what matters.
Yes.
It's the financial support and plans and tools that you can implement that actually make that journey a lot easier, that even after life, there's a level of sustainability, of comfort, of support, and of course, success that can still be attained, not only for yourself and your family, but even for those that you choose to share your wealth with. So I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. Tracy, Zanele, and Connie, thank you so much for your openness and suggestions that you've shared with us. Trace, I think we're going to have a lot of feedback post this webinar to catch up on.
Looking forward to it, Gugu. Absolutely. And as I said, I mean, just for me personally, just my takeaway is just the reminder around the fact that we need to be able to communicate with our clients, and we need to simplify things. We need to put away the jargon, which we fall into that trap, we all do, but I'm going to make a point of being conscious of that. But just from my side, Gugu, thank you. And Zanele and Connie, I mean, it's been an absolutely wonderful discussion that we've been having. As I said in the beginning, I view you as inspiring women. My perspective has not changed. So thank you. It's been a really insightful discussion that we've been having. I think just to the audience, just as a reminder, at Nedbank Private Wealth and Nedbank Financial Planning, we remain committed to providing you with personal and objective advice that's going to enable you to connect your life goals, so connect your financial decisions to your life goals and aspirations. And what we really mean by that is we're going to help you stay on track to make sure that if you are running a successful family business, if it's just you as an individual, that we're going to help you realize the goals that you want to actually achieve. And we'll do that through our expertise that we can provide through financial planning, succession planning, all of these wonderful things that we've spoken about today. So, in closing, we will be sharing an email with you in the next few days, and that really will have a link to a conversation starter discussion that we will have following this session. And the topic of that is family businesses, how to sustain, improve, and give back. And really, the purpose behind those conversation starters is really to try and connect the dots a little bit more to this broader discussion we've had today in terms of how can we, as financial experts, help you, as I said earlier, achieve your life goals and aspirations. So please look out for that link to the recording. So just as a reminder to our audience as well, if you'd like to get more thought leadership articles or you want to get more insights in terms of how we can help you as financial experts, please do visit our website. Your views do matter to us. We do want to make sure that we are discussing things that are topical, things that are important to you. So there is a QR code that's coming up on your screen now. Please do complete that quick questionnaire. It does help us prepare for these things going forward as well. If you want to take charge of your financial future, please connect with us. There is an email address that's coming up on your screen. It's contact@nedbankprivatewealth.co.za. And please just put in the subject line, put family businesses, and we will gladly be in touch with you soon. So again, thank you to these inspiring women for joining me this morning. It's been absolutely inspirational and lots of food for thought to take away. But finally, but by no means least of all, thank you to you for connecting with us online. We hope that you are taking, even if it's just one little nugget away, we hope that you are taking something away. And we do look forward to connecting with you again soon. And until we do that, go well. Thank you.